those. Now, if you're looking for something in particular, if you want to jump to a particular section of the video, look at the bottom of your screen right now and you'll see the timestamp and the name for the different sections of this video. So if you're not interested in the Transformers stuff, you can jump right through to the RPG and so on and so forth. But with that, let's get started with our first new product look. And that is some of the new items coming out from Hasbro in the Transformers line. Now again, this is not exhaustive. This is not everything that's been coming out. There's been a ton of new releases. We just wanted to hit on a couple of the more recent ones that we came out. Some of the more recent ones that did come out and talk about them. The first one we're going to talk about is the Studio Series items, because I've been really, really happy overall with the Studio Series 86 releases from Transformers the movie. You've had Hot Rod, Blur, Cup. Now, at some point, they decided to shift and release a lot of the 86 movies in the Kingdom line, and there's a few distinct things that happen as a result of that. We'll talk about those in just a minute. The first one I want to highlight is this one that I just saw. I was walking through the store just the other day, and caught me out of the corner of my eye, and I'm thinking to myself, ooh, Scourge, 86 Transformers Studio Series Scourge. I've had one for a while now. I really like it. I'm like, maybe I get myself another one and maybe start building up on the sweeps, right? Start building up the Armada. Well, interestingly enough, it's not Scourge. It's not Scourge at all. It is actually a Decepticon sweep. So Hasbro, in their infinite ongoing wisdom, decided to take the exact same Scourge figure that we see here in kind of a darker blue/purple tone and redeco straight up as blue. And that is absolutely the only difference that I can find between these two figures. They come with the same accessories, the same gun blaster and the same blast effect. They have the same background, which is one of the nice things, and I like them in the Studio Series, is they each come with these little like cutout displays that they can stand on with a bit of a movie background going on. But if you're wondering, between the two of them, they are absolutely the exact same toy. Now, interestingly enough, I almost prefer the blue version, the sweep, as it's being released, to the darker blue purplish version. This looks a lot closer to me like the original toy and a little bit more closer to the original color scheme. So at the end of the day, whether you want a Scourge or a sweep Scourge, you will not be disappointed. And I guess the good thing is while Scourge, the actual release, has been out for some time and a little bit harder to find, this appears to be a brand new release. And like I said, we saw it sitting right there on the shelf, and we're able to pick one up. As I said before, the Studio Series, one of the things I've liked about it is, one, a lot of attention to detail, a lot of going for a really good close look and approximation of what these figures look like in the movies, from a decent sculpt down to the hands, the wings. There's some very nice. The Wreck-Gar is an excellent figure. The Hot Rod is a really good figure. But like I said, they decided to then shift and release these two other figures, which I recently picked up, which is the Rodimus Prime and the Galvatron. And again, these are not 86 Studio Series. These are just Kingdom line. Now, I think the Galvatron works very well and ties really well into the other 86 Studio Series stuff. He's got the classic look from the movie, very similar to the original with the toy with the treads and the layout. One of my favorite things about this Galvatron, as opposed to any other Hasbro release Galvatron, is I like the head sculpt. I like the face. I think they did a much better job. The last one I had was a Combiner Wars or a Headmaster, where it was a snap-on head and then had basically a face mask that gave it the Galvatron crowned look. I wasn't a fan of that. I want a nice, clean, sculpted look. Now, when we look at the Kingdom Rodimus, I'm gonna drop his gun right there. When we look at the Kingdom Rodimus again, also, you're not gonna see any major, huge, oh my goodness, that really stands out, with a couple of small exceptions for me. Again, I love the face mold. It wasn't so much in the movie, but definitely in the third season of Transformers, the 84 to 86 series. they gave Rodimus Prime kind of an older, more distinguished look than Hot Rod, right? So they added some lines and a little bit more of a chiseled look to it to make him look a little bit more experienced and wise. And they definitely applied that here. So again, the sculpt overall and some of the aspects of the transformation do make for, I think, a pretty clean looking figure. And as Rodimus Prime on his own, I think he's all right. He's really good. I'm not disappointed. He's expensive though, and the reason he's expensive is he comes with his trailer. And all I can say is, I could have lived without the trailer. I get it, in alt mode, it creates that futuristic minivan look, but at the end of the day, I think they did a knockout job on just the Rodimus figure, and having to pay, upwards of $50 or more because of all this extra stuff. I don't know. I guess if you love him, if you love his alt mode, then you won't be disappointed. If you don't care about his alt mode, it's a bit price prohibitive. But of course, that's entirely up to you. The second to last figure we're going to talk about is a Studio Series release, and that is Gnaw. This is a Sharkticon from the '86 movie. I have no idea why, but Sharkticons are some of my all-time favorite characters in Transformers. I really can't explain it. I think both in the shark mode and their robot mode, I don't know why, but even down to the original '86 release of this toy, it has just been one of my favorites. And for years, decades, we didn't really have a good, new, updated Sharkticon. And this is not the only one that's been released. There's been some other Sharkticon releases in a smaller scale, but at this scale, and at this scale compared to the other figures, I'm very happy. It's ironically a bit challenging to transform. There's a number of steps involved in transforming him, but the trade-off is that the final robot mode looks really nice, really clean. You get that nice kind of backpack look with the top of the head. You get those nice jaws in front. And in the alt mode, the alt mode. In the alt mode, in the shark mode, it is also one of the cleanest looking shark modes that I've seen. It's, from a detail perspective, it's there are a few things I could look at this and say, I wish that the arms, the little clips on the arms folded down like in the original. But I'm really nitpicking at that point. And from a price perspective, being that it's a smaller figure, it's not price prohibitive at that point. So what I've really enjoyed, of course, being a fan of the original Transformers series, of Transformers the movie in 1986, is to see these and a lot of the others, whether they're calling them Kingdom or Studio Series, is a lot of that cool updated versions of these really great original classic Transformers figures from my childhood. Not to put down any of the other releases. If you're a Beast Wars fan or the other releases in the Kingdom line, that's awesome. And I think that's the key, is that they're doing a little bit of everything across some of the different lines. And for all of the criticism I can give Hasbro, like, releasing a figure that's basically the exact same figure and just putting a slightly different name on the box. But let's be honest, that's always been Hasbro way. Reskin, reskin, reskin. Give it a different name, give it a slightly different deco, but use the same mold. So knowing that that's what we're getting into, I guess the nice thing is now you can pick up some sweeps if you want, or you could even trade out your original Scourge if you much prefer the blue deco than the purple deco. The last item on our list is another new release, and this is finally the War for Cybertron Trilogy, Skywarp, and Thundercracker. So we've had Starscream. We've had these two released in different decos earlier individually. We've had the Acid Storm Seekers. But for those of you that either love the original versions of these Transformers, the jet mode of these Transformers, part of the original three Seekers, we finally have the original, the last two of the original three to round out that collection. The Acid Storm and others are basically the same model with just redeco, and we've seen versions of this, including the versions that are the Cybertron versions, but we finally get a nice collector package of both of them together. For those of you, especially because several times what happens is they would release the individuals as either a chase or an exclusive. So all of a sudden you're looking to drop a significant amount of money. I mean, just think about Thrust, one of the Conehead Seekers that came out last year, and very limited edition, very hard to get. You were, a $20 to $25 figure, all of a sudden $100 and more. So one of the things that I will say I am starting to see and appreciate is that while there are still some exclusives or retailer exclusives, they are either re-releasing or releasing updated versions to a broader audience, more mass release across multiple storefronts. So it's not, immediately eBay bait when one of these comes out because they're so hard to find. And we've started to see that big time this year, for example, in the G.I. Joe Classified line, where we're finally seeing releases of some of the figures that were extremely hard to get and exorbitantly, in my opinion, overpriced, all because they limited the supply. So as figures like Firefly, Major Blood, and others have started to come out in larger numbers, the collectors, the players, the toy hunters, everybody, the people like me are able to actually get our hands on these things without having to pay a huge premium. So that brings us to the end of round one, which is the new Transformers that have been coming out. Coming up next, we'll be talking about Dune, the role-playing game. Well, if you were hoping to hear something about Dune in this video, then do not fear, because fear is the mind killer. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about Dune. First thing, if you have not seen the new Dune movie, stop watching this. Go see the movie. Go see it in the theater. It looks amazing on the big screen. Can't get to the theater? HBO Max. Check out the new Dune movie. But if you've seen the Dune movie, or you don't have the time to go see it right this minute, stick around because we're going to now start talking about just some of the stuff, games that have been coming out for Dune, with an emphasis on the new Dune role-playing game. Now, before I get to the role-playing game, I do want to talk just briefly. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but there are a number of Dune related board games that have been coming out. Some that came out earlier this year, some that have just started coming out, and I wanted to talk real briefly about them just so you know kind of what's out there. So the first one here from Gale Force 9 is the Dune Game of Conquest. The Dune Game of Conquest is a redo of the 1970s Dune board game, still heralded as one of the greatest board games of its time, and definitely when you consider when it came out in comparison to when board games and Euro games of the started really gaining in popularity in the 90s and all the way now into the aughts and so on, it was maybe a little bit ahead of its time. Also extremely collectible, extremely expensive. So this release is basically a redo of the game with the original rules, all new components. They've already got an expansion for the game. They've got this beautiful map that you can use to replace the standard game board. And it is a meaty game, 1 to 6 players, but it is you're really getting into all of several different aspects. It's not just combat, it's not just area control. There's a political aspect to it, resource management aspect to it. It is it was a Euro game before we knew what a Euro game really was, because there was a lot of different things going on. A nice, heavy, complex, great board game that was released late last year, earlier this year by Gale Force 9. Now, more recently, we've had, here it is, Dune, also called a game of conquest and diplomacy. And what you can see about this particular game is that, also from Gale Force 9, is that this game features the likenesses of the cast from the movie. So the question is, are these two games the same? And the short answer is, not quite. The fundamental concepts of the original game are present in this new version, but it is not just a reskin using the characters and their likenesses from the new movie. It features a slimmed down, kind of easier to grasp entry into the complexity. So it's almost like you could start playing this version of the Conquest Dune game and then move right into the original game as well. And it's going to have more to add, but it's not the exact same game. This one supports 2 to 4 players. It plays in, minus learning curve. A session of this game can take an hour or 2 versus 1 to 6 players. 2 to 6 players, and this one's pushing 2 hours minimum. So right there you get a sense of this is going to give you the flavor for the bigger game, but it is definitely not the exact same game. We have a couple other games here as well that came out, a tie into the movie as well. We have Dune Imperium, which is a board/card-based game. Very different approach than the Conquest and Diplomacy. And then lastly, we have Dune House Secrets for 1 to 4 players over 2 to 3 hours. Each one of these games is fairly unique in the mechanics and approach. So while the theme is obviously consistent with Dune, where one is more of a map area control, politically driven game, others are a little bit more straightforward into combat or resource management, or in the case of House Secrets, it's a little bit more about the subterfuge. So each one really is a standalone game in its own right. And again, lots of excellent game producers here. This is not just a let's throw Dune on the box, but it really has old or really crappy or overly simplistic mechanics. We've seen that with a lot of movie tie-in games, right? You get a movie tie-in game, you open it up and like, it's basically like a Monopoly or a Sorry. It's got real, pretty basic rudimentary mechanics, and they just happen to throw Dune and some pictures on it. For the ones that we've played so far, that is absolutely not the case. The only one I have not played myself so far is House Secrets, but from what I'm reading and looking at the mechanics, again, I feel it's safe to say that it, again, is not just a overly simplistic Dune-branded game. It is a good game. It looks to be a decent mechanics-driven game in its own right. So there you go with some of the Dune board game options. But what I really wanted to talk about today is the new Dune Adventures in the Imperium role-playing game by Modiphius. So the first thing I'll point out right away is this is not a direct branded tie-in to the new Dune release. Different artwork, different representation of characters. It is not specific to a Paul Atreides, but is a extremely well put together book based on the Dune universe, running off of the D20 system. So for those of you who are familiar, the D20 system is a kind of an open source system that gets applied to a lot of different books. It's not nearly as specific and unique as, for example, a D&D system or some of the other systems out there. If you played one Roll20 based system, it's not too difficult to get right into another D20 based system. Yes, some of the names or attributes might change, but the fundamental mechanics underneath it are there, which is really nice. Now, the complete book is exactly what you'd expect. It is a complete book. It is a game master and player guide. It is going to walk you through everything you would expect from an initial release of a role-playing system, from character creation to world information, world development, obviously combat and skills. Very complete. It runs a meaty 328 pages in the core book. And I will say that, again, while it is not a tie-in to the movie itself that was released, the artwork, the page design, the overall quality all the way through is, I'm going to just say, magnificent. I really like lots of really interesting drawings. And as both a Dune, especially as a Dune fan, right, where I loved the visuals and I really enjoyed the new movie. I even love and enjoyed the original 1980s version. The fact is, this is also a book that's filled with all kinds of additional concepts and artwork that really just works so well and plays so well for any fan of the Dune universe. Now, you can get yourself a copy of the actual book, the main role-playing game. They've also released some collectible other collectible hardcovers. They have an Atreides, a Harkonnen, and this is a Coriolis hardcover. And really, the content is exactly the same. We just get a really nice, in this case, alternate cover style to the book from a collector's perspective. Also, they've recently released what they call the Game Master Toolkit, which ultimately is two things. First, it's a Game Master screen, real nice on one side, obviously the player's side, which kind of shows a overhead topographical map of Arrakis. And then on the other side, as you would expect with any Game Master screen, lots and lots of details, lots and lots of stats, all the things that a Game Master might need to quickly reference while they're running their game for their Dune players. So that's part of the Game Master Toolkit. Game Master Toolkit also comes with a shorter book, about 30 pages long, which not only talks about the different details that are on the Game Master screen, but provides a little bit more input into things like adventure creation, NPC generation, a bit of an expansion specific for some of those above and beyond Game Master things that they would want to reference all in its own little easy to reference book without having to go ultimately to the main book. A couple other things that have come out also. They have released a set of dice that go with the role-playing game. These are the Arrakis Dice, which are a series of D20. Again, it's a D20 system. So this is 5 custom D20 dice done. Dice, 20-sided dice that are done in a kind of a desert theme, and they have symbols on them. They have a Fremen symbol on them. So those are also available, and they will be coming out at the beginning of next year with an Atreides set of dice and a Harkonnen set of dice. Now, lastly, the other thing that they have recently released is a Dune Player's Journal. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is a notebook. Most of the notebook is just empty loose leaf type lined pages for you to take notes of your various quests and adventure. It does feature some special pages at the front for capturing things like your character details, equipment. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a journal. Is this necessary to play? Of course not. This would be something fun to add interest and flavor, I think, to the game. And, it's not terribly expensive, but is it required? No, absolutely not. It's absolutely just an add-on. Now, I'm not here to tell you about role-playing games in general. What I can tell you is that having created and run the Dune game, it is a good game, right? The mechanics, as I mentioned, being based on the D20 system, the amount of world information. You don't need to be a Dune fan to appreciate and enjoy this game. It helps, obviously, if you are a Dune fan and you're working on a game or being run through a game about Arrakis, about the Fremen, or you want to shift it away from maybe the Dune home planet and move and go onto something on the Harkonnen home planet. It does open up that universe, but you don't have to know Dune inside and out to enjoy just the thematic aspect of the game. Now, we did a video earlier about the Free Legion game, Alien, which is still going down as one of my all-time favorite RPGs. I love the way they did the RPGs. And one of the things that really distinguished the Alien RPG was this concept of cinematic adventures versus long quests or campaigns, right? So very common when you're playing role-playing games, especially classic D&D or D&D 5e, they're really built on a long campaign, right? Several sessions. Some of these sessions go over months or years or decades. You're invested in this character pretty much for forever. Alien introduced this idea of a one-shot, a cinematic campaign where you sit down, you play for 4 hours, maybe over 1 or 2 sessions, and that's it. You're done. You can use pre-generated characters or roll up some quick characters, but the idea is it's like a movie, just as it says, a cinematic campaign. You're playing that mission. What is your goal? Can you survive? Can you get to the end? What is your objective, and can you get it? But that's it, and it allows you to move on and be able to quickly either say, okay, I'm really interested now maybe building into a campaign or building my own adventure, or I'm going to use some of these short standalone adventures. Now, out of the box, the Dune RPG does not really capture that same aspect of a cinematic campaign. They do have in the book the ability to create short missions, short quests, which inevitably you could say are basically similar to a cinematic campaign. They're a one-off situation, but they have clearly built the game to be expansive and world and universe building. So keep that in mind as a game master and as a player. I think you're going to get based on the book as it's been released today and without any expansion material yet, you're really looking at this as more of a quest-driven type of game versus sit down for a few hours. If you want to sit down for a few hours and get a great Dune experience, definitely look to some of the various Dune board games. If you're looking for something much meatier, much more detailed, lots of interaction and building of characters, whether you want to build a group of Fremen or you want to have mixed So if you're looking for something more of a short standalone, get into the theme of Dune, the board games are going to be fantastic for that. The role-playing game definitely looks like it's going to be something you want to get and be more invested in from at least a time perspective. You will get out of it what you put into it, and I think that's an important thing. A lot of games, as you're going through a campaign, it kind of maybe sometimes gets the sense it's dragging on. The character progression is not at a pace that keeps you really invested and interested. And I think ultimately, if you're willing to give Dune the time, then the role-playing game will give a lot in return just because of how much it allows you to go beyond just the scope of Dune that you may know from the movie or even Dune that you know from the books and explore things. And as a game master, it does open it up for you to take and build on things that either haven't been referenced or not referenced to great detail in the cinema, in the books, and build really your own custom adventures in the Dune universe without it being a cookie cutter, oh, I took this right from this book or this movie, etc. So I think ultimately you can get a lot of enjoyment out of both of them. As we round out our new products and things that have come out that have really excited us, I wanted to spend some time now talking about Alien: Fate of the Nostromo. So I have other videos that talk about the Aliens board game that came out last year, Another Glorious Day in the Core. Fantastic miniatures game, Space Hulk-like type of game, tons of fun, absolutely fantastic game. Can't talk more about that. Check out that video if you want to learn more about that. I also talked last year about Alien, the role-playing game. I even mentioned it earlier in this video, which is a phenomenal RPG based on the Alien universe. And it really is Alien/Aliens, and especially with some of the expansions. So, of course, being a long-time Alien and Aliens fan, I was excited about Fate of the Nostromo from Ravensburger. Now, I have two other Ravensburger game here, the Princess Bride game and the Jaws game. And ultimately, the reason I wanted to quickly reference these is that Ravensburger does a lot of these like movie tie-in type of games, okay? And even earlier in the video, I said lots of times you get movie tie-in games and they're not terribly robust, right? They're pretty basic mechanics, pretty simple. And while the mechanics of both of these games, and I'll talk about Alien as well in a minute, but as the mechanics of both Jaws and The Princess Bride are not terribly complex, they are fun in their simplicity, right? There's enough variety and enough aspect that the mechanics feed the premise of the game, right? The mechanics of Jaws, for example, where it takes place over kind of 3 different types of quests, 3 different types of missions, following kind of like the movie, right? All the way leading up to when you're out at sea trying to track down the shark with Quint. So that's fun. It at least absorbs you as opposed to here's a game, based on like the Dark Crystal game where it's fundamentally the exact same as the Labyrinth game that came out. The board is very similar. The mechanics are almost identical. They just put Dark Crystal stuff on it. So at least Jaws plays out like Jaws game, should, even if it's not overly complex. Similarly, The Princess Bride does a decent job of that because each section of the game is done like a storybook. There is a physical storybook, and each time you turn the page, there's a different map, and it follows the progression of the movie. So again, while maybe the mechanics are not overly drawn out or overly robust, it does offer a lot of fun variety and is very accessible to players of many different ages. Now, on the flip side, a game that is not Ravensburger, but a phenomenal movie tie-in, is Infectionate Outpost 31, based on the movie The Thing. Here is a game that I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy. It's released by Mondo. But I got to tell you, I really, really enjoyed the game. And the easiest way for me to describe it for avid board game players, it's like Dead of Winter or a Battlestar Galactica, but much lighter. Much lighter, much faster. There's the aspect of traders. Who's a thing and who's not. It's spread out over 3 different missions with different objectives. It's pretty easy to pick up and play. And the importance, though, is that it's fun. It's interesting. It's what's going to be revealed. Who's going to help who. It's a decent game. It's definitely a fun game. Which, again, for all 3 of these, is nice to see that a movie tie-in game is not just a real basic, simple board game with the themes spread on top of it. It's at least integrated into the game itself. And that brings us to Alien: Fate of the Nostromo. Now, I don't know that my expectations were necessarily high or low for this particular game. I was hoping to get something that at least felt like it lived up to some of its predecessors. And in that respect, I think it absolutely did. The mechanics are not overly complex. There is not 50 things to do on your particular turn. So it does kind of trim down and make the game easy to get into and fairly accessible. When I played it for the very first time, the learning curve was fairly short, and when I've played it subsequent time, the learning curve is practically non-existent. I did learn some things, though. So first of all, let's talk about, real quick, kind of just the general premise of the game. You are a member of the original crew of the Nostromo, right? Featured in the Alien movie. The board game is a layout of 2 decks of the Nostromo. And anyone familiar with the film is going to immediately recognize some of the different areas, from the cockpit, the bridge, Mother, the galley where everybody eats, etc. Now, the idea of this game is to stay away from the alien. It is not a you die situation. You have a track that here related to your morale. Think of that as once the morale hits 0, the players have either died or just can't go on, and the game is ended. And encountering the alien drops the track, the placement of your morale on the track. Okay, so there's no needing to learn excessive combat or other things. It is easy to get into the idea of the game. Now, at the same time, the risk is, are you going to lose kind of the interest of the theme of Alien? And I think ultimately, while some of the other games in the Alien universe really capture that level of anxiety and stress, this one's not as bad. This one's a little bit lighter, but it still has that idea that you're constantly being chased. The alien is driven by pretty basic card mechanics. A card gets drawn at the end of everyone's turn, and at the end of your turn, the card determines, does the alien move? If so, how far? And how much morale is reduced if that alien encounters one of the other crew members. So there is always this idea, you got to be watching where things are happening, including that the alien could suddenly, instead of just moving space to space, could shift to another location altogether. The idea that it's in the ducts and it's moving around the ship. Now, depending on the number of players, the game is played out by achieving certain objectives. So the more players, the more objectives. And the objectives ultimately will be something like bring an oxygen canister to hypersleep. So when the game is first set up, there's some equipment that's laid out on the board. There's also equipment that you can build. And the equipment that you build is based on collecting tokens around the board. So you're constantly in this state of movement, always being fearful and watchful of where is that alien and how do I avoid getting pinned or captured by the alien creature. So as you're going around and collecting the items or building the items you need to achieve objectives, you slowly start to close out the main objectives, and then you reveal one of the random final objectives. And again, these final objectives could be anything from everybody in the crew needs to make it to hypersleep, to the self-destruct has been initiated and you have to do a certain number of things in order to stop the self-destruct before it goes off so you don't die. It is really primarily about moving your characters around the board, picking up and moving equipment, and cooperatively working together to figure out how do you avoid the alien while trying to achieve your objectives. You can play any of the original 5 members of the Nostromo crew. That does not include Ash. Ash is something that can be added to the game, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But from Ripley to Lambert to Parker to Brett to Dallas, all of them are available as player characters, and each player character has might have a special trait, tells you how many actions they're allowed to perform, and spaces that allow you to track any equipment that you may have built or picked up throughout the game. Now, from an equipment perspective, just like the movie, there are no machine guns. There are generally basic things from motion trackers to the little shock probes. But each one of those items has certain special abilities that can either be used multiple times or a limited number of times. For example, you can build a flamethrower, which you're allowed to use up to 2 times before you have to discard it. And what the flamethrower allows you to do is shoot the flames into an area and move the alien token a certain number of spaces. Same thing with the electric prong. It allows you to manipulate. You're not actually attacking, but you're using it to manipulate the movement and the position potentially of the alien. One of the other aspects is that little chips get added to the board that are called reveal. And when you enter a zone, you reveal that chip, and that chip might be nothing happens. Or it could be the alien pops out. That's how that alien jumps throughout the board. And the motion tracker, for example, allows you to reveal one of those without actually entering the room. Now, the alien still comes there and is still revealed, but you don't suffer the immediate hit to your morale. And now, from a couple spaces away, you can determine, okay, I can't go there. Where else can I go? How else can I meet this objective? So the importance of the items are not solely for completing objectives, because one of the objectives might be build a flamethrower and bring it to the workshop. And as soon as that character holding that flamethrower puts their pawn in the workshop, that objective has been completed. Unless it specifically says something else, just entering allows you to complete that objective and move on. But don't overlook the individual importance of the items themselves and what they allow you to do. Whether it's a prong, a flamethrower, a flashlight, a motion tracker, even the ability to get a box to capture Jonesy. One of the explorer tokens that can be revealed still causes a morale hit and ends up being just Jonesy the cat. Basically, jumped out, scared you, take a hit to your morale, and it gets shuffled back in, unless you have the cat crate, in which case you get to remove that token from ever being redistributed back on the board. So don't overlook the importance of the items in their own use, not just for the fact of completing the objectives. Now, I talked about Ash, and basically when you've played the game a few times, and I've played it several times, I've enjoyed playing it each time because, again, the number of objectives is different based on the number of players, and there's a number of objectives, which means you may not get the same one more than once. There's also a number of different final objectives. So you might decide, hey, you know what, let's go random, or let's ensure we're doing a final objective we've never done before. So that allows for some replayability and flexibility in the game. It's not the exact same game every single time you play it. And then the next step of that is the ability to incorporate Ash into the game as well. Now, Ash is just a token, starts in the med bay, and there are specific rules about how Ash, just like in the movie, has his own agenda, and that agenda might be different cards that get played that tell you activate Ash, move Ash, and subsequently certain other detrimental effects will happen. Basically, it increases the difficulty of the game. It adds another obstacle other than just the alien to the game, which might be good if either A, you've played it a number of times and want to amp up the challenge, or you're just looking for something out of the box that's going to present some added challenge. So overall, my review of the Alien Fate of the Nostromo is, it is a good game. It is not an amazing game. It is not going to redefine games as we know it. It is absolutely on par, I think, with Infection at Outpost 31, based on The Thing. It's, I think, a slight improvement, to be perfectly honest, over Jaws and The Princess Bride, because it really does have mechanics that support the theme of the Alien universe and of this particular movie. The artwork is excellent. The design is really good. So I think it's a very good, solid game. Is it going to be your go-to game? Maybe not. But what I find is that it's a great 1 hour. Oh, how about this? How long does it take to play? Well, assuming your players are at least basically familiar, add about 15 to 20 minutes learning curve, if not. But you're looking at about an hour, maybe an hour and a half tops. It does move fairly quickly, and because it isn't overly complex, there's not a great deal of having to super strategize every single move you're doing. Lastly, because it's cooperative, you get the input of the other players and trying to coordinate what everyone's doing, which really helps. So there's not really any downtime. You're not sitting there just going on your turn and then saying, I can walk away because I have nothing to do. You're part of the mission, and what's happening and what other people do can directly impact you as well. And the game works, of course, best if you're working with a group that really embraces that aspect of cooperation. So I think it's for the cost and for what it is and being alien themed, I'm very happy with the game and with the purchase. So that is going to bring us to the end of this this video for our new items roundup from Prometheus Falling Toys and Mentally Unbalanced. Curious to know what you think. Obviously, we can't cover everything that got released. Maybe there's something you would like to give us some your feedback on. Maybe you've played one of these games or collected one of these items and would love to give us your feedback. Well, we'd love to hear it. So go ahead and leave your comments. And of course, if you haven't done so already, click subscribe so we can continue to bring this and other videos in the future. Until then, I'm Dave Floss with Mentally Unbalanced and Prometheus Falling Toys, and we will see you soon.